It's time.
Welcome. So I wanted to ask you, David, first off, right off the bat, I was watching a lot of stuff from the old interviews that you were doing. And I remember that moment where you were on, I believe, an English show, and a gentleman was trying to ridicule you. And it seemed to be like your kind of moment of defiance where that happened and a lot of people went against you. They were making fun of you. And then that led you to kind of become stronger and just plow through it all. So it was that kind of your moment of, okay, I faced the adversity, but I know what my message is. I know what I'm dedicated to. So this is just going to propel me forward rather than keep me down. Was that one of those?
Well, if you look at life, it's very simple. It's choice and consequence. You make choices, you take the consequences of the choices, which lead to more consequences, which lead to more choices, which lead to more consequences. And you hope that as you experience consequences, you make better choices. Unfortunately, human race as a whole don't seem to have done that. That's why we're in the situation we're in. But that's what's open to us. So when I went through, historic levels of ridicule in 1991, 92, 93, 94, you have a choice. You can go under, and you can dissolve and you can withdraw from the world, or it can make you incredibly strong. And what all that ridicule did was to free me of the prison that most people live in, which is the fear of what other people think. And I can't tell you what a freedom that is when that dissolves. Because when you are focused on how other people see you, you are not yourself. You become what you think they want you to be so that they'll see you in a good light. Well, that all left me a long time ago. And it's allowed me to communicate information, some of which is far out, all of which at one time was considered way far out, but actually look around you today and it's not quite as far out anymore.
Yeah, some of it's starting to come full circle.
Yeah, so it's so important that people realize something that I've experienced for a very long time. It doesn't matter what people say about you. Of course, they'll say something else tomorrow. So now I've got people stopping me in the street who were laughing at me in the street years ago.
I was saying, thank you, David. I should have listened.
But the point is that if you don't speak your truth, notice that I'm not saying the truth. If you don't speak your truth, then when it's shown to be the way things are, and you come out and you say, hey, I knew that. Oh, yeah, of course you did. So you've got to say it at a time when people are going to laugh, they're going to ridicule, they're going to abuse. Because if you don't say it, then it won't be shown to be valid as events unfold. So I said it and said it and said it. And my God, the level of ridicule and abuse was extraordinary. But this is the point. And this brings us into this whole woke political correctness arena. It's not what people say about you. I'm offended. I don't understand that, you see, mate.
Yeah.
I don't understand the thought process that reaches a point where you say, I'm offended. I mean, if anyone should be offended at being ridiculed and abused, it should be me, but I'm not. Why? Because, one of the fundamental freedoms, basically on which all other freedoms depend in so many ways, is the right to be wrong. The right to be an idiot. Because if you don't have that right, someone else, i.e. authority, is deciding whether you're right or wrong. And then we're into the situation we're in now. Oh, you can't say that because you're wrong. Who says that? Well, I do. And so people give their power away all the time by saying, you offend me. Now, what that is saying is, I don't have power over my life. You do, because you have put me into a situation where I am emotionally upset and I'm offended. So you control my life. Where I'm coming from, and this is what we should be doing for our kids, not telling them to be offended by everything, not running around. What do they call them? Helicopter parents, flying around, doing everything for them. Because the idea, surely, as a parent, is to bring up strong, in their own power children who become adults, and not people who are frightened of their shadow because they're told from birth to be offended or frightened of everything. So where I'm coming from is that you can say what you like about me. That's fair enough. That's your right to an opinion. And if you don't have a right to free speech to have that opinion about me, then I don't have free speech either.
Yeah.
Because if anyone does not have free speech, what is left is not freedom of speech. It's freedom to speak within an accepted kind of a channel.
It's freedom to agree.
It's a freedom to conform, basically.
Yeah. So do you, because we were talking about, they shouldn't be scared to talk about what they want to, and I'm the same way. I'm a free speech absolutist. I feel like we need good and bad ideas out there. If there's bad ideas, we could filter them out. Do you feel now, though, there's a lot of, let's say, fear with everything that's happening, and people kind of don't want to hit the beehive? Because a lot of people want to express certain opinions, but then they're nervous because they're like, well, I don't want to get yelled at online, so I won't. Like, you clearly were fearless. Like, I remember seeing videos of you talking about, like, reptilians, and that's open. The second you start talking about that, you're opening yourself up to ridicule. So you have to have a certain level of guts just to go in there and start talking about reptiles.
Well, it's the real simple thing. I am interested in the truth of what the hell is going on. And I can tell you, after 30 years of research, this world is absolutely nothing like people think they're experiencing it. So I'm in pursuit of the truth.
Have you found anything lately, anything new to set you to that conclusion right now that there is? I'm convinced that definitely there's a group of people that control more than we know. But about the reptilians, about a different, what do you want to call it? A different race controlling things. Are you still committed to that? Is it still? Are we sure?
Yes, but of course, as you move on, you learn more and you see the context. The context widens and widens. I mean, all I would say to people is, let's just break it down.
Yeah.
Look at the night sky on a clear night and tell me there's no other life out there.
Oh, I'm with you there.
Okay, but it's even more extreme than that, because when you look at that night sky, you're only seeing that universe, if you like, within a tiny, tiny band of frequency. You're not seeing all there is to see in the space that you're looking at. You're not seeing all there is to see in the space that I'm looking at in this room. You're only seeing a tiny band of frequency called visible light. And when you break it down, and this is mainstream science, the electromagnetic spectrum is said to be 0.005% of what exists in the universe. Some say it's a little bit more, but not much. And visible light, which is the only frequency band that we can see, is a smear of the 0.005%. So what people are saying is that only what I see can be real, when you're only seeing an infinitesimal, almost laughable, narrow band of what exists in the space you're actually looking at. So, see, when you're pursuing the truth, and you let information be your guide rather than preconceived idea, you come to this stuff with a preconceived idea, which you defend till your knuckles turn white. You're never going to find out what's going on.
Right.
You have to have an open mind, but not a naive one. Not one that says, someone's told me this, so I'm going to believe it. Oh, I'll write that. No, you research it. And my methodology, if you like, is when something apparently crazy comes up, like the whole reptilian thing back in the 90s when it first started to appear from all bloody angles.
Yeah.
In my life, I didn't thought, oh yeah, he's reptiles. No, you put it on the back burner and you think, oh well, that's bloody interesting. It's a freaking strange, but it's interesting. And you put it on the back burner and you see if any more information comes, and if it doesn't, you just let it go. But it did, and it did, and it did, and it did. But do I know more now than I did 30 years ago? Do I know more than I knew 15 years ago? Do I know more actually than I did when I woke up this morning? Yes, because there's a great quote which is attributed to Socrates, the ancient Greek philosopher. Wisdom is knowing how little we know.
Yeah.
And when you look at life, and you look at human society, and you look at the woke mentality, you see the very inversion of that quote. Wisdom is knowing how little we know. So if we come back to what I just talked about, we can see a smear of 0.005% of the universe, and this is just one universe in an infinite reality. So that alone must tell us a very simple truth. Whatever we think we know, at whatever point we think we know it, there's always vastly more to know.
Agreed.
So your mind is constantly open, got its trainers on its feet, ready to go where the information takes you, because whatever you know, there's vastly more to know. There has to be, because of the situation that we're in. And what woke is saying, and the whole political correctness, which is been funded and promoted into existence by the 1%, by the way, is that no, there's not more to know. Only our opinion and our view can constitute truth and reality. Anyone that is questioning what we say is true, with no research, by the way, must by definition be wrong. And so you have the I am right mentality, whereby people are censored not by whether they're saying something that's true or not, but by whether it challenges the orthodoxy.
I'm curious because you said it's being funded by the 1%. So is the goal to fund it so that people shut up and don't look into things? Is that what?
Oh yeah, I mean one of the definitions of political correctness that I've used in the books is that it is manipulating the population to silence itself. You see, when you
sheep policing themselves.
Yeah, well, yes, and I've used that analogy as well, because at least sheep need a sheepdog symbolizing fear to keep them in line if they won't just follow the shepherd without question. But humans have dispensed with the sheep. They police each other. And woke is an extreme new dimension to the sheep policing the sheep. So when you break down this web of secret societies and semi-secret groups, etc., that has formed this global web of manipulation that I've been exposing for 30 years. When you get to its core, it's a tiny few people that are actually in full knowledge doing what they're doing and pushing the world in the direction it's being pushed.
Are these people public, or are they people we never even heard of?
Some of them are public. The biggest inner core people you probably never have come across. They stay in the shadows. But someone like Bill Gates is a blatant frontman for this network, who has bizarrely, if you break it down, he's come to vast wealth with a software company, and now he's running, in effect, global health policy.
I agree there. That is, I've talked about this as well. It's a little strange, yeah.
Since Trump pulled the funding of the World Health Organization, its biggest funder is Bill Gates. The guy Tedros, the Ethiopian chap who's the Director General, is a long time Gates asset. He's been on the payroll of Gates-connected organizations. And so when Tedros opens his mouth over this pandemic, which he actually declared, it's Gates talking. And when Gates is talking, it's this cult, as I call it, talking. So because you've got a tiny inner core, you have to manipulate the target population in ignorance that you actually exist to play out your agenda and impose it upon the population. You know, the police officers in Australia at the moment, in places like Melbourne and Victoria in general, you see these amazingly fascistic incidents that are happening there. The police officers who are doing that don't know there's a cult ultimately driving the policy that's leading them to act like Nazis. They're just doing what they're told to do, and they're being recruited. I've been pointing this out for a long, long time. They're being recruited often on the basis of their personality. So they will do things like that, while your genuine police officers would not, or at least they'd push back against it. So if you think of a pyramid, and this is how it works, mate. This is how the few control the many, right? You think of a pyramid, and at the top of the pyramid, you've got the inner core of this cult operating absolutely in the shadows. And then you come down a few levels of the hierarchy, and you very quickly meet the point where in the hierarchy of human society, nationally and globally, you reach the level where they have no idea there even is a cult. And how the imposition works is a simple process. It's imposition, acquiescence, imposition, acquiescence. So the inner core of the cult impose their agenda on levels below them, which will be aware that there is a cult, they're working for it. They will acquiesce to that imposition, and they will impose it on the next level. And so you come all the way down the pyramid with this hierarchical process of imposition, acquiescence, imposition, acquiescence, imposition, acquiescence. Each level acquiesces to the one above, imposes on the level below. And then you come down to the general population, nationally and globally, and suddenly you reach the point where if the population acquiesce to the level of the hierarchy that's imposing on them, then they complete a circuit. They complete a circuit between the cult inner core, the top of the pyramid, and the population. And it's a circuit of imposition and acquiescence, which leads to the will of the tiny few at the top being imposed on the entire population. And that's exactly what we've seen, mate, since all this pandemic lockdown thing unfolded. People say, and they're right, of course they're right, that human society has been absolutely amazingly transformed in a few months. But that transformation is, or the speed of that transformation, is actually precisely the speed at which the population acquiesced to it. And if we hadn't, or some of us didn't, but if people hadn't, we wouldn't be where we are now. We wouldn't have a devastated economy with people losing their jobs and losing their businesses and spent decades building up. We wouldn't have a fascistic track and trace system emerging to track people 24/7. And we wouldn't be facing the imposition mandatory by mandatory rules or by you don't come out of lockdown if you don't have the vaccine.
Right.
We wouldn't be facing this imposition of the Gates vaccine, and it is the Gates vaccine.
And what's the end goal? Is it just to get everyone? What would be the end goal of decimating these economies? Because right now, it's not just here; all over the world, businesses are shutting down. People are suffering. So, what are they trying to gain from this?
Well, interesting. I had a book out 2 days ago.
The Answer.
85%, mate, of that book. I started it last October. 85% of that book was written before the pandemic lockdowns all kicked in, the extreme, the lockdown level of it. And in the first 85% of the book, I was just coming to the end when it all kicked off. I describe what the agenda is for the world for this global cult. And what I have watched in the months that have followed that point, because obviously, I've now written in the book about why this pandemic is a complete hoax and the reason for it. But what this pandemic hoax has given this cult is exactly what I said they wanted in the first 85% of the book. And I've been talking now for decades, and this will explain the reason for demolishing the world economy. I've been writing for decades about where the kind of society that we've been led to under the radar, now out in the open, for decades and decades and decades. This is not something that started, in 2020. And it's what I call the Hunger Games society. And it's a tiny few at the top. Some people call them the 1%. I call them the cult. There's very good reasons I do that. And then you come to the bottom of the pyramid, and the idea is that, and the plan is that basically that will include almost the entirety of the global population. And in between the 1% and the population, there is planned to be a military police state to impose the will of the 1% on the population and to stop the population challenging the 1%. Now, I've been writing that was the plan for decades and decades. And the crucial thing, if you're going to make that happen, you're going to put the population under control because they are dependent on the 1%. The crucial thing you have to do is destroy the independent livelihoods, the independent businesses, and the independent employment of the population. Otherwise, they're not dependent on you. Thus, you cannot control them to the extreme that you want.
So by decimating the economy, you turn independent people into dependents.
Yes. What we've seen in country after country after country, because this is globally coordinated. If people go to my website, davidicke.com, I've done a 16-minute animated film explaining how the pandemic was pulled off and basically why. And so in country after country, including my own here in Britain, including my own brother, who spent decades building up a bus repair businesses, and then they took all the buses off the road, basically, and it's been devastating. So all over the world, you've had businesses destroyed, and if not destroyed totally, well, wait for the lockdowns in the winter, and that will finish them off. And you have vast unemployment. And this has destroyed the independent livelihoods of enormous numbers of people, which is what? It's making them dependent upon the state. And that dependency says, we'll give you some kind of, real basic income. Because they're now talking about a basic income. That's been in my book for decades. And that was the plan and why. And in return for that, you have to do what we tell you. You can't rebel, you can't challenge, you can't do this. If you want this, and I'll give you a wonderful example of it at work. In Australia, which is an extraordinarily tyrannical country in terms of its government and its authorities. I mean, we're now seeing in front of our eyes what's been going on in the background all along. But in Australia, they stop your benefits or take a chunk of your benefits away if you will not have your child vaccinated according to the government's decreed list of vaccinations. So this is what I mean. Oh, yeah, you'll get survival income or just less than survival income often, but you're going to have to do what we say. And that's the idea of this control, this dependency upon the population. And what we're going to see during this winter, because this is all a script playing out, oh dear, it's so predictable if you've been doing what I've done for 30 years, you're going to see manipulated food shortages and other things that are going to make people dependent, more and more dependent on governments who are simply vehicles for this cult in the shadows.
And is this just so that they can maintain power? These cults, like, what are they? Since they already have vast amounts of wealth, right? How is this helping them? Is what I don't understand. Do they just want to see people suffer? What's the?
Well, the thing is, people get caught in the idea that it's all about money. Okay. I still see great chunks of the alternative media saying it's about money. It's not about money. Of course, these people are extraordinarily greedy and psychopathically greedy. But if you get into the inner core, money is not just about wealth. It's about control. Because what is freedom? Freedom is basically choice. The more choices you have, the freer you are. The fewer choices you have, the less free you are. And what is the dictating force, probably above all else in the world today, in the system that we have, in terms of what choices you have? It's money. So if you control money and you hoard money, then you control choice. And if you control choice, you control freedom. So if you control money and you have the power just to give the crumbs from the king's table to in the form of some kind of income because everything else is gone, then you have complete control over them. Money is power. Money is control. Right. And incidentally, one of the things that I've been pointing out since in the book, since when would it have been? 1994, is the plan was to get rid of cash and have a cashless society.
Yeah, I do see that happening, yeah.
Yes, well, it was always planned to happen. This is the point. And so when Tedros, the Gates mouthpiece, said very early on in this pandemic, which he declared, that, you can catch this, quote, virus off money, it was obvious to me why he said it. It was nothing to do with health. Don't be ridiculous. It's to do with destroying cash, and that's what's happening. It's going out of use at an incredibly rapid rate now. And as someone who's researched this psychopathic cult for 30 years, I mean, this pandemic has been used to tick off the boxes of a long list of things that I've said in my books over decades. This is what the plan is. But of course, if you only get your news from, CNN, MSNBC, or the BBC, then you're not going to know any of this, and it's just going to be random events. But it's not random; it's all coordinated.
So this cult, we're talking about the highest point. Are these all people that are not originally from this planet? Is that what we're saying?
No, if you've got to go beyond this cult web is the expression of a non-human force within human society.
Okay.
Basically,
kind of like being possessed.
Even at the level of this cult, they're still gophers for the force that's ultimately behind it. And when you look at ancient cultures all over the world, and I've studied this now over 30 years, you see a common theme in all of them. They use different names, they use different symbolism, but they're describing the same thing, which is of a non-human force manipulating human society. And the anthropologists go along and they say, oh, this group is talking about these gods, and these people are talking about these gods, and this culture is talking about these gods. And you say, hold on a minute. Just look at how they're describing them. They may give them different names. Of course they're going to. They're different cultures. But look at how they're describing them. Look at how they're describing how they manipulate. And it's extraordinarily common in the themes. And so when I started researching this in 1990, and I spent a lot of time in America in the period from the mid 90s through to 10 years ago, particularly. And I was meeting people, whistleblowers, if you like, in the intelligence community, in the military, who've been involved in mind control projects like MK Ultra, the infamous one in the United States. And what they were telling me about what was going on was simply a modern version, a modern description of what these ancient cultures were describing. And when you therefore connect these dots, it becomes very, very compelling. And then when what they tell you the plan is unfolding before your eyes, it becomes even more compelling. Because the reason vast numbers of people are looking at my work now around the world is because of what I've said in the past was the plan, and the plan is here, or vastly advanced parts of the plan are here, not where they ultimately want to go, which is to connect the human brain to artificial intelligence. The psychopaths of Silicon Valley are already talking about it. People like Ray Kurzweil at Google, a Google executive and futurist.
The hive mind.
He's giving you a year. He's saying that this is going to be underway by 2030. And here's a man who is openly, publicly saying that once the connection to the human brain is made with AI will do more and more and more of human thinking. And these are his words, not mine, until human thinking and the human mind that we know it now will be eventually negligible. And you've got this guy, Elon Musk, another complete fraud out of Silicon Valley, who says on one hand, AI could be the end of humanity, brackets true.
Right.
And then starts a company called Neuralink to connect the human brain to computers. And he's in the process, along with Bezos at Amazon and others, but they're the two big ones, putting satellites up, low orbit satellites, beaming Wi-Fi and 5G at the Earth, which is part of this whole AI technological grid. This is what's happening while people are watching the game show, watching the sport, not in a stadium at the moment, but on the telly and everything. And you see, the thing is, if you're a magician and you're doing the trick here, you want people looking here. So this is it. Look here, look here, look here, look here, look there, look there. That's what's happening. It's all diversion, and it's all psychology. Because what we're seeing with the social distancing and the ludicrous masks, etc., is not being driven by health. That's why it makes no sense. It's being driven by psychology. In these different countries, they have organizations specifically dedicated to studying human psychology in a way that if I do this, what will the reaction be individually and collectively? So, okay, we'll do this and we know we're going to get that reaction. Organizations like this are driving what is happening to us. It's behavior modification. In Britain, the vast overwhelming majority of people in Britain, like almost everybody, won't know this, but the British Cabinet Office has half owns a private company called the Behavioral Insights Team, which brags that it operates worldwide and advises American cities, etc., on ways to manipulate the behavior of the population. And this Behavioral Insights Team, also known as the Nudge Unit, nudging behavior down the channels they want you to take, is driving this whole unsocial distancing mask thing. And when we just introduced in this country mandatory masks in shops and other places, that'll be the day. You'll never see me in a mask, I'll tell you that. One of the people, a government advisor that was really out there pounding out that we must have masks to protect the population, was a professor called Susan, what's her name? Susan Icke. And she's not a professor of health. She's a professor of psychology. It's the psychologists that are driving this. Because when there's a few of you and you want to control the many, you have to do it by controlling the perceptions of the many, which become the behavior of the many. See, people have accepted the masks, God help us, and they've accepted social distancing, and they accepted the lockdown and the house arrest.
Because it's supposed to help them live.
Their perception was that. Absolutely right. Their perception was that. So if you control perception, you control behavior, and that's why it's being driven by psychologists.
Interesting. And now what would be, so you said, for example, the day that will catch you in a mask, it's not going to happen. It's the day you die. Are you avoiding it because of it's not going to help health-wise, or because you do not want to conform?
Well, two reasons. First of all, what I put on my body, I will decide that. Thank you very much. Not some moronic psychopath in a dark suit who knows nothing about health anyway, and it's all about behavior modification. I mean, the holes in the map, even if you believe in the virus, and I don't, for reasons I explain at length with enormous evidence
in the answer. Okay.
But even if you do, viral particles are so minute, they're much smaller than the holes in the masks, and therefore they're useless. But what they do is they get you to breathe in your own recycled carbon dioxide, which your body's trying to expel, and you don't breathe in enough oxygen. And what that does cumulatively with long-term mask wearing, which is where we are and are going, is that's going to lead to respiratory problems. And what they're going to say is those respiratory problems are actually COVID-19. And I'll give you an example, mate, of how they bloody well know this. They're talking in Ireland about when the schools go back and they're going to have communal child abuse with the children forced to wear masks at school all day. They're thinking of having breathing breaks where the kids can go out and take the mask off for a few minutes and then come back in. So they know the kids are not taking in enough oxygen when they force them to have masks. And you know what has happened up to this point is the propaganda has been that almost everyone who, quote, dies, they don't, from COVID-19 is elderly or very elderly, and it hardly affects the young. There's a reason for that, which we can get into. And it's nothing to do with COVID-19. It's to do with the scam of why old people are apparently dying of it and not the young people. But they want to move it as we go into the winter towards always also a danger to the young. And if you're going to stick masks on kids all day, every day, and then if they go in the shop, you're forcing them on them, or they go into any inside place, you're forcing them on them. And where they want to go is you can't go out of your house without a mask. In fact, some idiots in authority in Florida are telling people they should wear masks in their own home if someone's there that doesn't usually live there. But this is the point. What this cult is after, and in terms of perception, is your subconscious. Because it knows your subconscious will become your conscious. It don't really necessarily want to hit your conscious mind. It's certainly not as a number one aim. It's your subconscious. They plant perceptions in your subconscious, not least through the fantastic mind control technique of simple repetition of the same thing.
Right.
And then these planted perceptions feed through to your conscious mind, at which point you think that they're your own thoughts and opinions. And I'm watching this, I'm watching this very closely all over the world. And what you see is people saying, this is what I think is happening. I've concluded that this is what's going on, and this is what's happening with the virus. And what comes out of their mouth is word for word the official version of the virus. So they believe that they're coming to their own conclusions, but they're actually just repeating the official story. And so the subconscious is what people are after. So when you look at anything, this is the point I'm leading to. When you look at anything, there is a conscious mind reason for it, and there's a subconscious mind reason for it. And the subconscious reason is the big, real reason. So masks, conscious mind reason to protect me from the virus.
Right.
Subconscious reason, subjugation, deletion of individuality. You've got people, I know this because so many people have told me, where they walk past people they know very well. They're both in masks. They've not even known that they've walked past the someone they know. Neither has. Yeah. And so this subjugation is all impacting upon the subconscious mind and the self-respect of people subconsciously by imposing this. And everyone's looking the same with a mask on. And when you are symbolizing someone being silenced or being censored, how do people symbolize that in images? They cover the mouth. And so these are the subconscious things that are going on. Because we should not underestimate for a second the dismantling of subconscious self-respect, sometimes often conscious self-respect, of being told to wear what I call a face nappy or a face diaper by the government, and you just do it. And this is another point about the psychology. Once you understand how the psychology works and what they're actually doing, so many things start to make sense. For instance, one of the big mistakes people make is they write off the apparently contradictory and the apparently stupid coming out of government as stupid and bureaucratic incompetence. Now, of course, there are people in government who are incompetent, etc. But the core, no. There's method in the madness. Because if you hear something, the government says you should do this, and you, as a sovereign individual person, you say, okay, let me have a look at this. You say we must do, why do you say we must do this? Okay, well, I'm going to do a bit of research. I'll come back to you. And you look at it and you think, okay, I think what you're saying makes sense. So yeah, I'll do that. Now you're still holding your sovereign individuality, your sovereign power. But this is the key. They put things out there that they know people are going to see are ridiculous, stupid, and contradictory. Like we had a point in this whole process in this country where you could have a nanny from outside in your house, and you could have an estate agent, a real estate agent in your house, but you couldn't have your mother, your father, or your grandfather or grandmother. You could meet your grandmother in the park, or you could meet but you couldn't meet them in their garden or your garden.
Yeah,
and you could meet your grandmother, but you couldn't meet your grandmother and your grandfather at the same time. You had to see them 10 minutes apart. Now, this was obviously ludicrous, but this is the psychology of it. If they can make people see how stupid it is, but still do it, they are breaking down resistance. And they are turning people into nodding, acquiescent software programs where the authorities press enter and the population responds. They're making it, they want people to see the contradictions and the stupidity, because if they can get them still then to acquiesce, then they're getting them into a state of total acquiescence cumulatively every time they do it.
That is interesting. I have one question to ask you. I don't want to forget, because I don't know if you've seen right now. There's a lot of backlash, and people are fighting against these pedophile networks that apparently go really high up. Is this something that the cabal that you were mentioning, this cult, is responsible for, or they're somehow implicated? Because I know in Hollywood it seems pretty vast.
Yeah, I've been researching this for 30 years, and as I've gone along, some very, very strange things have come into my research. But as you move on, you realize their significance and why it goes on. And that's a big story in terms of pedophilia. But I came across this in the about 95, 96, particularly 96, when I started big time traveling America. And I realized that, and it's all in my books, they could have sued me, these people, decades ago. But they didn't. Where I name names, famous names, for being pedophiles and Satanists.
Are they the same names that are coming out now?
Well, a lot of people, a lot of those that have come out, a lot of the names that came out after, for instance, the Jimmy Savile revelations in this country, the BBC entertainer who was one of the most prolific pedophiles if not in British history.
He had support from the Queen, basically.
When that's right. Oh, the royal family are all into it, mate. Oh my God, yes. And I've named them. And Jimmy Savile, this historic level of pedophile, was brought into the inner circle, the inner bosom of the British royal family in the 1960s by Lord Mountbatten, member of the royal family, very close associate of the Queen, and a known paedophile. Jimmy Savile in the 1960s was one of this new breed of people then called a disc jockey.
Yeah,
he used to play records on the radio and be on Top of the Pops, the BBC, pop music program. And yet he's invited into the inner core of the British royal family. He then becomes very, very close to Prince Charles and Prince Philip, and stayed in the inner bosom of the royal family all the way through, almost to his death, after which the whole thing came out. Oh, of course, the royal family part of it didn't come out. It came out that he was in the bosom of the royal family, but of course the mainstream media never said, well, hold on a minute, why? Well, I explain why in the books, because Jimmy Savile, this is the part that hasn't come out, but I knew about this way before, because I met a lady in 1997 who was a longtime friend of Princess Diana. And her name was Christine Fitzgerald. I've still got a tape of our conversation in a drawer behind me from that time. And she told me about the appalling, disgusting treatment of Diana by the British royal family and all these connections. She also mentioned what Jimmy Savile was. Unfortunately, she wouldn't go public with it, so I had no chance of doing anything with it at the time, because that Ike's mad anyway. And where's your evidence? Well, she won't speak publicly, but she spoke to me. I've got it on tape. And what she told me turned out to be true. And she was talking about how Savile was a big inner circle member, bosom buddy of the royal family, and how Princess Diana couldn't stand him because he was so bloody sleazy. Do you know they use this disc jockey? This is the fact. They use this disc jockey, this historic paedophile disc jockey, and Satanist, by the way, as a mediator at one point between Prince Charles and Princess Diana when their marriage was breaking down. It's bizarre. It's just ridiculous. But this is what goes on, because, like I say, the world that we think we live in is not the one we live in. That's just the smoke screen we're given. It's the movie screen we're given, so that we don't actually see the one we really live in. And again, when I've investigated these rich and famous cult insiders, cult assets, pedophilia and Satanism. Pedophilia for sure, and Satanism come up.
Yeah, a lot of it. It seems like rampant. I don't know. It's shocking.
You mentioned earlier. That's why Hollywood is absolutely awash with it, because Hollywood is a cult creation. Why? Because they're after the perceptions of the global population, and Hollywood is the place where people get so much of their perception from. How many people, if you ask them for what happened in this historical event, will give you the Hollywood version of it?
Yeah, the movie. They always think of the movie, instead of the actual event. Yeah, you're right.
The connections between Hollywood and the CIA and the U.S. military.
Yeah, that I know. Yeah.
Technical.
They even block people from using certain jets if they don't, or certain just military bases if they don't agree to follow a certain narrative in the script to show them as the good guys. Yeah, I know about that. Yeah, they cut funding.
So this is what you're dealing with, and for me, what on earth is Canada, an apparently sovereign nation, having the Queen of England as its head of state? I mean, I just think it's bizarre. Same with Australia and New Zealand. It's
crazy.
Just, what? Because, the royal family is indicative of this whole network. It's certainly an expression of this cult, big time. It's not top of the cult, no, but it's certainly involved in it.
I don't understand why in Britain, right, people still want to have a queen, because I've asked people and they tell me it's a comfort thing. It's like, we know it. We know the royal family is it's part of our ethos, so no one's thinking of getting rid of them. But to me, it just seems insane that you have someone with a scepter knighting people still around in 2020. It's a little crazy.
I know. Well, the world's crazy.
Yeah.
I've been saying for all this time, the world is actually mad. And it's when you realize the world is mad that the pennies drop. What drives you crazy too is trying to make sense of the world. Well, the world's mad. Don't try to make sense of it. It's been turned mad by this cult, which is an inversion. Everything this cult does is to invert the truth. Therefore, if you want to know the truth of what's going on in the world, in my experience, is basically invert what you're told by the authorities, and you'll be very, very much closer to the truth. And what's happened is that the extreme nature of this period of months we've been through has brought the madness, far more of the madness, out of the subconscious into the conscious, and we're now seeing it in front of our eyes. But that craziness has always been there. It's just been in the subconscious, in the background, where you have a situation where people can make a case for people dying of hunger in one part of the world when people are dying of gluttony in another part of the world. It makes no sense. And okay, you have these situations where some have and some don't. But to actually apparently intellectually make a case for why that's okay, and I've heard people do it over and over again, is madness. It's madness. Of course, it's madness. Of course, there's no intellectual reason for that. It's economic, and the more that you can subjugate people through economics, if you look at what's happened to vast numbers of people in the world through this period of decades and more, so much of the world has been subjugated because it doesn't have money. Poor countries, they're subjugated because they don't have money. And what we're seeing now is they just want to take that process, that technique, and play it across the whole world.
Oh, that's interesting.
And that's what we're seeing. And China is the blueprint, by the way. I've been saying again for decades, if you want to see the West tomorrow, unless we wake up fast, look at China today. And it's no accident that this virus is said to have come out of China. Because it's one of the great cult centers of the world, China. And what they've done in China, because this cult was behind the Mao Revolution, is to, behind the authoritarian tyranny of China, where they don't have to pay lip service to freedom and democracy and any public voice or opinion, which is they're not doing here now, but they have up to this point. In China, what the government says happens. So what they've done is managed to incubate a system of fierce control, not least based on technology and technological tracking, which they've incubated to play out across the world. And that's what's happening now. If you look at the West since March, it's become dramatically more like China than it was in February. And that's not by chance, that's by design.
Hey, you're not wrong.
Yeah.
Well, David, I know that I kept you extra, and I appreciate the fact that you stuck around. This was very davidicke.com, and also The Answer is out right now. As far as we're concerned, when we're recording this, it came out 3 days ago, so it's available for everyone once they're watching and listening to this. So davidicke.com, and The Answer is out now. David, anything else you'd like to plug? Anything you want to tell people?
Well, just one thing. You know, people say, "What's the solution?"
They do, yeah.
We're drowning in solutions, and just as choices lead to consequences, choice and consequence, so solutions tend to lead to more problems, which demand more solutions. If you're going to remove a problem, the way to do it surely is to remove the cause of it. Because you remove the cause, the problem must disappear, because what's making it manifest is gone. And what has allowed a few to control literally the global population is the acquiescence of that population to authority. And authority and this cult, let me make this point before we finish, they have no power. They have no power. The power they recycle back in human control is the power we give them. A few weeks ago, when it was really hot in this country, thousands of people headed for the beaches. There were so many people on the beaches, particularly south of England, not far from where I am. Social distancing was impossible because too many people. And the local authorities called an emergency incident. Oh, don't panic, emergency incident. And you go, okay, so what are you going to do about it then? And they would scan the beaches full of people sitting next to each other, thousands of them. And of course, the response is, well, there's nothing we can do. There's too many people that won't cooperate. Exactly. And if we would only do that, this game would be over tomorrow.
If you would get together and not cooperate. Rebel.
It's not about not cooperating with each other and not cooperating with what's best for society. It's not cooperating with our own enslavement.
Right.
Because the few can only enslave the many if the many acquiesce to the enslavement. You know, just with the example of the people on the beaches. And if people would just research, stop watching the mainstream media and only getting your information from them. They're owned by corporations which are owned by the 1%. I mean, to think they're going to tell you the truth? Do research outside of that, because there's enormous amounts of information there. And you'll find that actually all these major pillars of what is happening now are all there for no other reason, not your health. They're there to control you. And the control is meant to get far more extreme than it is even now. And every time we acquiesce to the next stage, we get closer and closer to the end goal, which would make George Orwell wince.
That's a scary thing to say. If Orwell's wincing, we're in trouble, David.
It's in our hands.
Yeah, we are headed in a weird direction, though. You are correct.
Stiffen your backbone, grow a pair, and let's sort this out. Because if we don't, God help the kids.
Let's see if people get together. But thank you, David. I really appreciate this, and it was a fascinating talk. I hope everyone else enjoys it as well.
Okay, mate. See you soon. Bye.